Welcome to Amazon Legends, where we have real stories about making it big on Amazon. Our guests are CEOs of large companies and entrepreneurs who became power sellers, also providers specializing in helping sellers, aggregators that acquire sellers, and former Amazonians will give us an insight from behind the scenes. Here is your host, Nick Urison.
Welcome to another episode of Amazon Legends. My next guest today has been in Amazon space working with sellers for 12 years, and his role included working with data, advertising, and tactical aspects of building a brand on Amazon. Now, tactical aspects, that's everything because it's all about resilience, patience, knowledge, and so it's a big deal. Today, he's the founder of Mercantile Commerce, a full-service boutique agency for Amazon sellers that specialize in outdoor categories such as camping and hiking. And when he's not working, he's a big soccer fan. He's a volunteer. You're going to love this one. Volunteer staff at his church that he helped launch. Yep. So, as entrepreneurs, we're launching businesses all the time. Well, I've never heard somebody launch a church, so it's very unique. And also, he loves gardening and music. And with that, everybody, meet my guest, Nathan Grimm. Welcome to the show, Nathan.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me, Nick.
So, launching a church. So, what I'm wondering about is how many other volunteers were there?
That's a good question. It can depend on how you count them, I suppose. But we started with about 4 or 5 staff, a board of elders, and a team or a congregation, I guess, of 30 people from the area that were in our community. So that's how we got started and carried on from there.
Well, those who did it with you and then the 30 people, now you guys are the owners of the church, so you're not gonna ever, right? So you take ownership when you build something.
Yeah, it was a really interesting experience because a lot of us came from a larger church where most of the effort goes into carrying on existing programs and ideas. But when you start from beginning, you don't have any existing programs. And so you think, well, it's just us. What do we know how to do? What do we think is important? Because nothing's on the calendar, nothing's on the schedule. You have to create it from a blank page. So that was a really refreshing process, really, because you could really connect with what the congregation, the staff, and the founding pastor kind of felt were important and carry on from there. It's an advantage in a lot of ways, being able to start with a blank slate and not have to manage change. Just start from zero.
Well, change is, they call it change management, right? So it has to be managed. It's a lot. So today I am looking forward to our conversation because in my book, the most important part of running and growing an Amazon operation has nothing to do with sales. It has to do with managing the inventory in a way that will ensure continuity of your advertising efforts, your sales. Of course, that means algorithms get satisfied with sales velocity and everything else. So in order to do that, you've got to have inventory at all times. As yet, this is not an easy situation because ultimately it comes down to finance. So something, when you and I first met, something you said, I wrote it down, and it's so right. If Amazon overperforms, you are out of stock.
Yep.
If Amazon underperforms, you are out of cash.
Yep.
So, that is so straight to the point of why inventory is so important. If you're out of stock, your rankings take a nosedive. It takes you 2 months to get back there.
Yep.
If you're out of cash, you're out of business. No cash, no business. So this, to me, is the most important aspect of it. So we're going to talk about that. I want to learn about your approach and share with our audience. And the other thing that we're going to get into is another part that is as important because it has nothing to do with data, knowledge, or anything on its own. but it's really not only knowledge, but the resilience. That is monitoring your performance, dealing with performance-related issues, but most important, when something goes wrong, being able to identify what went wrong as soon as possible is key.
Yep.
And a lot of the times, because nobody gives warning, right? So suddenly you wake up, or in the middle of the night, you get an email, or something happens, sales dry up, and then you're trying to figure out what the hell happened here. Why this thing happened. So how do you get to it? So that's what we're going to talk about. So with that, let's dive right in, and let's start with the inventory. So what is your approach to making sure that you have inventory at all times?
Yeah, the first thing we do is we split it into two camps. One, because we have a slightly different process for inline products that we've sold for a while, we have good historical data on, and a separate process for new items where we have no history or limited history and have to do a bit more legwork. So for inline products, it comes down to defining the seasonal curve. How do we expect the demand for these products to change over the course of a year? And then defining the velocity, so what's our current rate of sale that we can extrapolate out, and defining the stage of the product life cycle. Should we expect this product to be growing, staying the same, or slowly declining? On new products, we do all that, but first, before we do anything, we have to find a comparable item. Like, what do we think this will perform like? If that's something in our catalog, great. We have a lot more data to work with. If it's a brand new category, like something we've never sold before, we're dealing with more estimates and industry tools to find that comparable product. And then we need to think about things like, is this a red ocean or blue ocean? Do we need to have the cheapest, best, newest product to win because there's so many aggressive competitors? Or is this a product, on the other hand, where nobody knows they need it? They do, but they don't know it yet. And so we have to go and find all the customers. And finally, with those new products, just what else is happening? Is this a product that's going into 1,000 doors at bricks and mortar? Is there a big ad budget behind it? Is it an accessory for a key item that we already sell? Like, what else informs the context of this product that gives us an indication on how quickly it will ramp up and how much existing demand we can harvest?
Okay, so first of all, two different approaches, two different logics that need to be applied, separating the new launches from the existing ones. So existing ones are easy. So you're looking at the history of it, right? And then you're looking at, depending on when you are launching. So let me ask you this right away. When you say history, is 6-month history enough?
No, I'd say 18 months is probably what you need. The more the better, really. If you have multiple years, you can identify how stable your seasonal patterns are. You have more to look at than just what happened last year and how did it change. You can see, well, did the same thing happen the year before and the year before that, and how similar are those things? So that can really increase your confidence in the shape of your seasonal curve if you have many years. But if you have 12 to 18 months, you can start to model what does the seasonal demand look like. For an aggressive launch, should be a steep ramp no matter what, even if it's going out of season, because you start at nothing. Amazon doesn't know anything about your product. You have to drive all the traffic and all the sales. But once you've gotten past those first 6 months, you should have achieved a certain level of stability and momentum on the platform. And so the 12 months after that can start to establish, okay, what does a reasonable seasonal curve look like?
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I ask that question is because I get asked quite a bit from my clients. They say, okay, how long are we going to work together? How long is needed in order for us to say, okay, now we know what to do, and therefore we can do this ourselves? Because ultimately, that's what you are here for, right? So provide the help for the seller. So Why do sellers need help? Well, if you don't get the help, you're going to have to learn it yourself. And learning what Amazon requirements are all by yourself, you're really throwing money away, because you're going to be using your inventory as your teacher. And that's not really the smart way to do it. So you need help, period. Okay, how long? I tell them this. First of all, allow yourself at least 12 to 18 months to really get a good handle on everything, for two reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, you have your launch. Launch will go away in 3 months and you'll settle down.
Mm-hmm.
But then what you need is every little thing that you're going to have to learn once you start ramping up, from replenishment to customer experience to content to finance, the accounting, advertising, your funnel, commercial. Is a lot. So you're not going to learn all this in 3 months. So therefore, we are immediately into 6 to 12 months. So why is it not enough? Once you get into that second half of the second 6 month period, is because your historical data is the most valuable thing, and you don't have any historical data as a complete picture until you've left 12 months behind.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, you can start to make use of it. But really, honestly, the real historical data is what you are putting on top of those 12 months. But more important, what happens is, if you do things right, you're going to start to now handle larger numbers of orders, and your challenges will transform into different types of challenges. Therefore, 12 to 8 months. So bottom line, be prepared to be patient and then keep going. So my question to you is, what is your methodology to use this? Let's say that you have 18 months of data. What is your methodology to use that 18 months of data to predict how many pieces you're going to sell in the next 3 months?
Great question. There's so many inputs that go into it, but there's a few key ones that we make sure that we track. The first is we take trailing sales. Your last 30 days of sales are the best indicator of where you're at today. How much do people want it? What is the impact of the accumulation of all of the marketing and conversion efforts that we've put in? And so long as you've been in stock and winning the buy box in those last 30 days, that's the best indicator of how much velocity we have today. So what we do with all of our products is we take the last 30 days of performance data, and then we run it through a seasonal curve that says, okay, this is a camp chair. It sells more in the summer than it does in the winter, in very predictable relationship. So if we sold 100 units in June, we know that we should expect to sell 15 units in January, because that ratio between June sales and January sales is very consistent from year to year. And we can do that for every month of the year. So that's step one, is what do the last 30 days look like, and expand it out to a year to help us look at what does next month and the next few months look like, because that's what we're looking to send into FBA. What we also do is we create annual forecasts where we think about the bigger picture. What products are going away? What new products are coming in? How's our marketing budget changing? What's the advertising plan? What is the rest of the market doing? What is the rest of the brand doing in the market? And we basically call our shot for a year and say, okay, if we're doing all this stuff, we think that we're going to sell this many units in every month of the year of every SKU that's in our catalog. And that's really useful when the last 30 days of sales is an unreliable guide. Like, we ran out of stock, we were losing buy box, we went on sale and sales tripled. And because that helps ground the future and prevents us from just copying over the mistakes or the anomalies of the recent past. So we can look at both of those things. And then lastly, those events that we plan, most common one being discount periods. Those are in a calendar. Everything is a SKU level forecast for how many units of lift that's going to provide. We usually have good comps based on deals we've run in the past on similar products to how much lift it will provide. And so we incorporate that into our forecast. And so all that put together gives us a couple of different ways of coming up with how many units do we need to send into stock at FBA in our next order.
Okay, so you look at the last 30 days and then you
Mhm.
look at the annual
Yeah.
potential,
Mhm.
the total number of units. So you are looking at last 12 months of data and you say, okay, if last 12 months we sold 100,000 units, in the next 12 months, we're gonna sell X number of units. And that is the reason why you have 18 months of data, right? So because you are comparing the 12 months
Mhm.
to the previous 6 months as month over month, what kind of uh, growth or decline. I mean, it may
Mhm.
happen. For some items, it may be decline. And then you apply that to the next 12 months by extrapolating over the months that you didn't have the data for. So
Mhm.
is that a fair description of how you go about the next 12 months, total units?
Yeah, exactly. And then the detail is broken down by month by SKU so that we know, okay, if we sold 100 last month in January, uh, for a warm weather product, that should be about 3% of our sales. And February is not too different. It should be about 3% of our sales. But in May is usually 10% of our sales for the year. And so if we sold 30 units in January, we should expect to sell 100 units in May. And so that helps us with our forward-looking orders by breaking it down by the month and not just by the year. The annual aspect of it definitely helps for production and longer-term supply chain, and that's where that's used. When it comes down to the daily orders to ship into FBA, that's where the monthly is really critical.
How about things that you have no control over? For example, the growth in traffic on Amazon.
Mhm.
Do you ever take those into account?
Those are things that we pay attention to, but are very difficult to forecast. We look at the macro environment or even the demands of a specific category and think about, is this on the increase or is this on the decline? Um, but and those are things we will factor in, but ultimately they're things that are very difficult to, we're not in control of those things. And so that those environmental factors are things we study about the recent past to tell, okay, are there more or fewer people who searched for camp chairs on Amazon last month than the same month in the previous year? Because that gives us a lot of context into did the market grow or shrink
Yeah.
at a very granular level. Um, but I don't have a good way of projecting what those things will be doing in the future. And so that would be a great thing to incorporate.
Yeah. Um, what about things like, for example, you may not have sold in certain months and historically because the item became unavailable.
Mhm.
So how do you incorporate those into the model?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a big reason why we have that static annual forecast. I think a lot of people might think, "Oh, static, that's a lot of work," and that's true. It is a lot of work. But also they think, "Oh, it must go out of date," and it does. But the great thing you can do when you just have a spreadsheet and you say, "Oh, what should I expect to sell in May?" You say, "Oh, last year, I only sold 10 units in May, but I sold 50 in April. That doesn't make much sense. What happened? Oh, we were out of stock. Okay, maybe instead of using last year's sales numbers to establish my curve, I should interpolate what would have happened if we hadn't had those issues." Now, we also come in at the end and give a plug for a standard out of stock rate and lost buy box rate because we've never had 100% in stock and 100% buy box rates in any year. So we don't expect that with our forecast because that would be a great way to buy too much inventory all the time. But we don't assume that just because we were out of stock last year in May that we will be out of stock next year. So that's really where the static forecasts save us from just copying forward mistakes of the past.
So the other one is the buy box. So if you're not in the buy box 100% of the time,
Right.
that's another factor. So of course that implies that you are tracking your buy box rate already. If you're
Yes.
not, you really should. So
Yeah, you really
but
should.
let's assume that you are tracking your buy box rate. How do you factor that into the calculation?
That's one where I'm doing that in our performance analyses of the past to tell me, did we have a major buy box issue? If it was 3%, 5% lost buy box, a lot of times when the lost buy box numbers are that small, we can't even attribute it to another seller. Like Keepa won't have seen another seller. We've never seen another seller, so we just attribute it to a bit of noisiness in the data. But if there was a big issue in the past, then we'll back it all the way out, because we don't assume that we'll have a similar issue in the future unless there's some strange scenario where we can anticipate that. And then at the end of projecting out each month, we'll add a small plug for each month, because again, we know we'll lose the buy box a small percentage of the time. So with those long-term production plans, we want to factor in a little bit of lost buy box.
Yeah. So, I mean, the question is, why would you lose the buy box? Because you are the owner of the listing. So you don't have to necessarily lose the buy box. If you are losing it because something unanticipated happened, and you can take action and gain the buy box back immediately, right?
Yeah, it really depends on what sort of business you're running. If you're a private label seller who only sells on Amazon or through direct to consumer channels, it should be very rare that you're losing the buy box. And that lost buy box might just be an artifact of a suspension or an out of stock or some other issue that wasn't related to some other seller beating you in the buy box. But with other types of businesses, resellers in particular, you're probably dealing with lots of lost buy box. But with the brands we work with, they're distributed worldwide in bricks and mortar. And so you can run into issues where brands aren't fully controlling the flow of their goods. We're dealing with an issue today where one of our 3P seller appeared with quite a bit of inventory of one of our brands, and it's still being researched, but it seems like they bought some from a foreign distributor, moved it to the US because they saw an opportunity to win some buy box, and they are. So it really depends on the type of business you're running and how much control you have over the flow of goods. I don't believe brands should be selling on Amazon if they have very little control over their flow of goods. They should seek to gain control over that first, or else things like forecasting your inventory will be very difficult. But if you do have a high level of control, even if it's not 100% control, then there can still be issues from time to time, and that's what we see. So global distribution can be one. Your retailers, maybe you have agreements with them that say you can't sell on Amazon, but sometimes they do and ask for forgiveness later. And sometimes retailers need to solve their own inventory issues and they liquidate stock to whoever will buy it, and inventory will make its way into the resale market that way.
So, I mean, when I was a seller, I was a reseller. So projecting how many pieces I could sell in order to issue POs, that was key for me. And of course, it's a much harder proposition to project your inventory as a reseller. So if you get trained in that, then you can pretty much do the other one easier. But still, there are other things. So I tell you what I did.
Yeah.
So first of all, if you are out of stock, what's your buy box rate?
0 or nil, depending on how you think about it.
0, right?
Yeah.
So I tell people this. So let's say that you sold 120 pieces in one day, and you were in the buy box 50% of the time. How many would you have sold if you were in the buy box 100% of the time?
Roughly double.
So quantity sold divided by buy box retention rate, That gives you
Yep.
your total potential. So that's one way I went about it. But what happens if buyback retention rate is 0? 0 means it's absent.
Yep.
So therefore, you have your out of stock days, and that's a guess as good as you can have, and you would simply check your historical what you did on that day. So that gives you your first of all your full potential. Number one. The other thing that I did for things outside buybacks, for example, traffic fluctuation. For example, coupons and things like that you run, or better yet, these special days like graduation days. I mean, everybody knows shopping season, Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, Father's Day. But at the end of the day, all these event-driven days, how do you calculate for them in a way that is a universally applicable method? You know what I did?
What'd you do?
Discount rate or multiplier. So what I did was, first of all, I found the 0 point. What is my average unit? How many units do I sell? This is at SKU level. How many units do I sell on an average day?
Yeah.
10 pieces. Okay. Then week by week, you can apply the discount rate or the multiplier based on whatever that discount rate or the multiplier is associated with. And of course, you are applying that to the gross rate, which is something that you adjust after applying the buybacks rate. So now you have that number that you're working with at SKU level, and then by applying the discount rate with a spreadsheet, you can easily see, over time how many pieces you're gonna need, you are likely to sell. And then whatever that final number is, you can then, if you want, you can apply a discount rate to the whole thing or not. It's up to you. But it's at least one way, because I always struggled with, applying these curves to my calculations. How do you do it? And in the end, I came up with this methodology where I simply assign the multipliers or the discount rates, and then therefore you have one. What do you think about that approach?
I do the same thing. I've run a lot of deals and seen the response many times. And so I know that if I discount a product by 25% ahead of Memorial Day, I should expect a lift of between 1.4 and 1.9. So selling 140% of normal to 190% of normal during that time frame. And that's specific to the type of product I sell, the category I sell, the time of year. It will be different for Prime Day. It'll be different for Black Friday. So I can start with those general long-term averages that I've seen. And if I have hard historical data, I can look a bit closer and see, okay, what happened when I did this percentage on this day or this set of days, or even more closely for those key items that do a lot of velocity. What happened when I discounted that product by that much on that day? and fine tune it, because the difference between 1.4 and 1.9 can be very significant, especially when it's on one of your more important items. And then the other thing that you spoke to the noise of the past and clarifying it, is you have to do the same thing with your performance analysis to feed into what do we think is going to happen in the future. Is you have to back out the noise. So that buy box is one of those things, especially if you struggle with losing buy box frequently. You have to calculate the gross sales rate absent any lost buy box. And you also have to back out the lift you got from discounting, because you're going to discount. You'll probably discount differently in the future than you did in the past. It probably won't be identical. And so for your future forecasts to match what you think will happen, you have to back out what you did in the past and then add in what you're going to do in the future. So in addition to layering on what you're going to do in the future to what happened in the past, you also have to back out some of those things you did in the past if they're not constants.
Yeah, it's not easy.
No.
So
Either that
this
or you
is,
just look at a recent time period that you know is noise free and project it out to the future. Well, one or the other.
yeah. So this is for those that have historical data. For the new ones, share with us some of your
Yeah.
approach for the new ones.
Amazon has so much better data that they provide sellers today than they did even a couple years ago. A couple years ago, you'd be looking at comparable products. You'd look at their bestseller rank in a big category. You'd trying to find a comparable one where the unit rate, and try to align all the stars to come up with a swag that sounds good. With the Product Opportunity Explorer in particular, there's a lot better data. Amazon now gives you search volume on terms. They give you estimated conversion rate for all products on those terms. They tell you which top products are in those terms. They tell you what percentage of clicks each of those top products gets in these niches. So none of that tells you what you're going to do, but you can go and find comparable products and say, okay, if I get to a point where I'm let's say I'm the fifth product in this category, what am I going to perform like? And you can answer that question. And so none of it tells you what you're going to do, but it does tell you what will happen if you achieve a certain position in the niche that you're looking at. So for products where you've never been in the niche before, the Product Opportunity Explorer is a big deal. I will note that you have to be a brand owner in Seller Central to have access to that,
Right.
which ties into a bit of our story. We operated as a reseller for a while, but when Amazon announced the Product Opportunity Explorer and the Search Query Performance dashboards, we set up a new business entity. We told our brands to fire us and then rehire us as an agency so that they could have their own accounts and we could have access to these dashboards with real search query volume. So that's if you've never sold in a category before, go get the Product Opportunity Explorer and go find comparable products and be honest. How many reviews does this product have? How many products are exactly like the ones I'm doing? How important are the new and unique value propositions that I'm going to add into my product to the target market? How long will it take to achieve a top 5, top 3, number 1 spot in this category? Some things are really hard, and and some things you build it and people come because it's so clearly a better value proposition than exists today. Mm-hmm. But that helps you find a comparable product. You even get Amazon even shows you the change in search volume over the last year. So even without selling a product, you can estimate a demand curve for the category. You'll know if a product sells twice as much in the summer as it does in the spring or the winter.
Yeah.
But a lot of the new products we launch are very similar to products we've already sold in the past. Might be a new color of an existing product. We might have redesigned an existing product. And so in that case, it's making sure you understand what a good comparable product in your catalog is and copying it over. Now, if it's going to be on its own detail page instead of a variation, you probably need to you start at 0, ramp it up to where you think it's going to be versus just adding in a new color to an existing variation where your sales will be at their long-term potential very quickly. But when it's similar to something you've sold before, it really is that think through the tactics of how it will be launched, how much built-in traffic you're going to get from your brand name from an existing product detail page, and factor in any launch timelines and marketing spend to it as well.
I have a question for my listeners. Are you experiencing cash flow challenges with your Amazon business? Well, silly question. Who is not, right? So let me introduce you to Viably, a unique solution tailored for Amazon sellers and e-commerce enterprises. By connecting your Seller Central or Shopify account, you can promptly access funding along with a variety of financial tools, all for a flat fee. It's as simple as that. And for my listeners, they are offering an extra $1,500 in funding for eligible applications. Start your quick and easy application today at runviably.com/legends. And that's runviably.com/legends. Yeah, when it's new, that product opportunity explorer is extremely good for niche. But this, I mean, this is not subject of our discussion, but this really suggests that you have to have a solid strategy for keywords and what niche you want to be in, right? So without that, you can't really make use of it. So, but even if you have that, you're not going to be in just a single niche. You're going to be in multiple. So you have to analyze what product opportunity explorer shows in terms of total search volume and also that conversion rate. Now, I'm glad you mentioned that conversion rate because that is not the conversion rate on the clicks. That's the conversion rate on the search term, right? So it says if somebody searches by this term, what is the percentage that translates into purchases, right?
I believe the conversion rate is based off a click, but I would have to double check their glossary.
Yeah. We had an episode recently, and then we actually are going to be having a part 2 discussion on the product opportunity explorer. And that search term conversion is a weird one. It's all about what kind of a conversion you are achieving on those search terms, not necessarily clicks, because it's a bit of a different approach. But anyway, it's definitely worth digging into. But Product Opportunity Explorer is by far is the best source to go. And then you look at the other thing, Nathan, that I use it for is, let's say that you're launching in a niche and it says that there are 31 products that are receiving all the clicks. So you've got to be one of those 31, right?
Yep.
You can design those strategies.
It's crazy how different niches can be. I think some people think that, oh, if you rank number 1, you'll get half the clicks. If you rank number 5, you'll get 5% of the clicks, and that's fairly consistent across different search terms, but it's really not the case. I've seen categories or search terms where 90% of the sales go to the top 2 products and everybody else is fighting for the scraps. And I've seen categories where 5% of the sales go to the top product and people look at many products before they make a decision. A lot of those can vary with, low price products. People tend to buy and products that people reorder frequently tend to be more weighted towards the top, whereas expensive, complicated niche products where there's a bunch of different ways to do the same thing or to do similar things, but not the same thing, people tend to spend more time researching before they make a decision because every option is different. So it really does. I really do look at that. How many products received the top 80% of clicks metric tell me how much gravity is there at the top of the search results and how important is it that I'm top 5, or can I be on page 1 and have a business?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a big deal. And the good news is you can download that report and then you can track it over time. Because looking at these reports, my main point every time is when you're looking at a report, you're going to download, it's for a time frame. Yes. Doesn't mean anything. You're looking at a slice. So you need to read it to do a good job. You need to download the same report for the same time frames and then look at it over time. Whatever it is you're looking at, look at it over time, right?
Yeah, with search query performance, that's what we do because that's our traffic and impressions from our keywords. And we download it for every week and every month and track our performance over time to tell us if we're getting more or less share, basically, of a category. I don't do it for every type of data in Amazon because it's clunky. They don't have that data in an API. If there's a piece of software that sells it to you, they're scraping it today. But it's important enough, and those insights are valuable enough that it's worth the expense or the time to track how you're doing for your keywords over time.
So I have a question for you. So as you know, advertising reports show you, let's say, for example, you're looking at the performance of yesterday,
Mhm.
and it may show 5 purchases.
Mhm.
Come next week, you look at yesterday's data next week. For the same day, it shows 8 purchases because there's something called 14-day attribution, right? So
Yep.
somebody may not buy right away. Okay.
Mm.
Search query performance,
Mhm.
same deal. So when you download it, so
Mhm.
my question to you is, are you downloading every week's data every week? Because that data keeps changing.
Well, it's not an infinite look back window, so not every week, no, but the last few periods and then replace the data you had downloaded the first time, yes.
That's a good point. So I had a guest, a former Amazonian, and he said that search query performance data is not restated. He calls it restating the data.
Mhm.
He says apparently the search query performance data, once it comes out, that's it. That's the data they give you.
Yeah.
So his name is, by the way, for my listeners, listen to it. It's a very useful episode. Todd Vanderstelt is his name. Episode 308. I would highly recommend it. We got into data, and then he was giving the Amazon perspective. And so, how do you deal with data that's not restated?
I'll tell you what I do with that, what I don't do with that data. The first thing I did when that search query performance report was available in my accounts is I downloaded the top 1,000 terms for I work with 4 brands, so I downloaded for the 4 brands. And then in the unit sales for my brand column, I totaled it up and I looked at what percentage of all sales are they saying is attributed to one of my top 1,000 terms. And for most of the brands I work with, that, anything beyond the top 1,000 should be a very small volume queries, very few clicks. And what I found was that those top 1,000 terms accounted for between 16 and 20% of the unit sales in the periods I looked at. And so immediately what I realized is that they're probably, now I don't have access to Amazon's internal analytics. I don't know how none of us on the outside do, but they are probably being very stingy with the unit sales that they're attributing to a search, such that if you've never set up conversion tracking on a website before, you might not think about this, but there's a lot of decisions you have to make to figure out, should I attribute this sale to this this activity? And so I don't know what they're doing, but intuitively, I think it's unlikely that only 18% of the sales for my brand on Amazon are influenced by search results. That seems way too low, because everybody else, everything else would be, okay, somebody did a search, clicked on a product, and then clicked on, an ad, or clicked on a people also purchased, or people went through my brand store, or people clicked on the product and then waited and then didn't do anything and then bought it later. But the main navigational component of Amazon is search. And so having only 18% of sales attributed to my top 1,000 searches seems inexplicably low, unless almost any activity between the search and the purchase will cause it to not be counted in that report. So I don't rely on it for purchase data because I don't think it's telling enough of the story. But I do rely on it for click data because clicks happen right away.
Yeah.
And so long as there wasn't a problem with the data, that needs to be restated, then an attribution time frame doesn't impact it. So that would be my main caveat with it, is I don't look at sales, add to carts that closely to track my market share. I do look at clicks.
So I will give you another perspective that will probably send you wondering.
All right.
How does that work? That I don't know about the 16 to 20%, but let's
Yeah, that
assume
was
that
just the 4
that's,
brands I looked at for that time
yeah,
period.
that's fine. Let's take that at its face value.
Mhm.
You know where the rest of the sales are coming from? It's coming from traffic that is not search traffic.
It really depends on what you call search traffic.
I tell you what I call non-search.
Mhm.
People who bought this also bought this. Buy it again
Mhm.
because you bought it before. So this is what we did and we found. And this is the real weird situation.
Yeah.
First of all, what's the general premise on Amazon in order to get organic traffic? To rank on certain keywords high enough so that when people do a search, you come up on page 1 high enough so that without having to advertise, people can click on it and go make the purchase, right?
Yep.
That's the entire gameplay for any Amazon seller. Let's achieve as high rank as possible on keywords. And then they even start tracking where do we rank every day. So the whole idea is get organic rank on the search terms so that we don't have to pay sponsored product or any advertising.
Sure.
I mean, that's generally most sellers are trying to do that.
Mhm.
So if you do this, since you like data, and I'm curious to see what you find. First of all, if you download the advertising reports and check the total amount of paid keyword traffic,
Yep.
and then download for the same time frame, do it for a month, and for that same month, download the search query performance.
Mhm.
And as you put it, 1,000 keywords should pretty much cover most of it. Anything beyond is going to be very little. Assuming that you can also add a multiplier and then say, okay, maybe our total search is going to be this.
Yeah.
So now you have a total search traffic, the
Yep.
clicks that you received from searches, paid and organic in total.
Mhm.
When you compare the two totals, you're going to find they are almost equal.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Then you go download the business reports for the same time frame and look at the total clicks in that same time frame. You're going to find that the business reports total will be at least double.
Yep.
Which means that the balance is obviously traffic that is anything but search.
Mhm.
So therefore, those sales that you really think that, oh, it's impossible, my search. Well, there is clearly a significant amount of traffic that comes to the product page that is not search driven. So what happened was I had an episode with another guest called Chris Moe. I highly recommend, again, very enjoyable episode. M-O-E is his last name. And what Chris said was, what influences that organic traffic? And his suggestion is BSR. So the bottom line is, it doesn't matter where you rank. So this ranking on keywords is just totally unnecessary, and it's the shiny object over here that everybody is drawn to. But instead, just work on your BSR. The more BSR you have, the better BSR means better organic traffic Amazon will give you, and better organic traffic is going to give you more sales. That was the final conclusion we had.
Interesting. Well, I don't disagree with that, especially because if you think about Amazon's site today and Amazon's site 10 years ago, and what percentage of the page is an ad, it's massively different.
Oh yeah.
10 years ago, there were on a search result, there was a little gray box at the bottom of search results, and there were 2 ads in it. And today there's sponsored brand, at least, 2 to 4 sponsored products, and then, in the middle. And then on every product detail page, there's ads. There used to be, long lists of shovelers, and people also bought as well. That's a little bit the same. The reason I said it kind of depends on what you count as a search, is that especially in ads, Amazon's made that line very fuzzy. If you make a search campaign that only bids on keywords, no auto campaign, no product attribution targeting campaign, your ad can appear on a product detail page and get clicked. But in your reports, it'll say that click came from a search term, the search term you bid on. Similarly, you can make a campaign for a product that only targets ASINs, and you can appear in the search results. And in the search query report on that ad campaign, it'll attribute it to the ASIN where the targeting came from. So it's not uncommon for me to, because in my internal reporting, I put the search query performance clicks and my ad clicks in the same table for the same search term for the whole brand. And it's not uncommon for the amount of clicks from ads that were attributed to a search term to exceed the search query performance report.
Yes, it does.
It does not happen for every keyword by any stretch, but if it's a keyword that's important and we're making sure our visibility stays high, it's usually a little bit higher. I get more clicks from ads than total that's reported in search query performance.
So how do you explain that? I mean, search query performance supposed to be the total.
It's a difference in definitions and measurement. I don't know what the difference in definition and measurement is. It could be ads has the cookie at the top of the page and search query performance has the cookie at the bottom. So it takes longer to fire and it misses a portion of the bounces. It could be like I was saying, about the ads attribution being fairly greedy towards what you target. It'll take your keyword, it'll take your keyword bid and show you on product detail pages, but then say it was for the search term keyword and not the product detail page, because that's what they used to target. And so it really is a difference in methodology. And it's also why I said it depends on what you think of as search traffic, because if somebody searches for a camp chair and then clicks on my competitor and then sees my ad and then clicks immediately on my product, that's not search traffic. That user just went through search. The last click right before they got to my page wasn't a search click, but that path was heavily influenced by search because that's how they got to my competitor. Similarly, if somebody searches for a product, clicks on one of my products, and clicks on a comparison chart in my A+, and then buys that product, again, I would think, the last click was not a click on a search link, but if that was my website, I would be attributing that as a search sale because I don't expect people to only visit one page on my website. So there's really a lot of room for interpretation with all of these metrics, and so I think it's really important to think about search purchase journeys as complex because they're very rarely search, click, buy. And so there's many opportunities for semantics to impact the metrics that we see, which is why the first thing I did when search query performance report became available was, okay, how many of my sales are they actually attributing to these searches? Because I wanted to get some indication about how greedy or stingy their attribution was, because that impacts how I view that data. So that doesn't give an answer on what exactly is happening, but it's important to be thinking about those things whenever we get access to these data points to to understand what we know and maybe what's just a trend. That's a reliable trend because the measurement methodology is consistent. And so we know if things are growing or falling or if things are doubling or halving, but maybe 100 searches or 100 purchases from search aren't 100 purchases from search.
Well, and also they may not be 100 purchases either, because how do you count the purchases?
Yeah. Right. They
So-
may not back out returns, and they probably don't on the search query performance.
Yeah, and also, search query performance. So let's say that you may look at the data for, let's say we are recording this in February, let's look at January. So you download search query performance for January, and it may show 1,000 purchases. But
Right.
some of those 1,000 purchases may be from December. They just were attributed to January.
Sure.
So when you say, okay, search query performance is 1,000, where do you go to check how many purchases you in fact had, so that you can say, oh, this is only 16%. So where do you go? There is no place to go, because the definition may be different. That definition that you will apply. I mean, the safest and the most definite way to look at your order count is download your order data. That's paid.
Yeah.
It's paid for. So when you look at that, that does not ever fit into search-related reporting. So so that's why I say to you, you are telling me 16 to 20%. Okay, well, how do you know what is the total? You don't either.
No, I mean, I don't know how many I should actually be attributing.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, what is the comparison? So you know that search query performance is going to show X.
Yeah.
So you want to know what percentages it represents, but you really do not have a reliable way to say, okay, I'm going to compare this to this as the total. That is also an unknown.
No, I mean, you can compare it to your total sales, but or you
It's
can
dollar
compare it
value.
to
It's
other
Yeah.
units or dollars depending on what you're working in. No, I totally agree. I don't have an authoritative, because I don't run Amazon's analytics, and the definitions they publish are insufficient to tell you.
Yeah, this exercise, I think in your case, what you're doing, and in my case, what I'm doing, it's all a feel-good exercise. We just feel that we're doing something to get an understanding, but really, what are we getting?
No.
Definitions are all over, right?
Yeah, but I'll tell you what's a little bit more concrete about it, though, is the relative change. Because unless Amazon is playing with
Yes.
their measurement and not telling us, sometimes they do say, hey, we made a change to our measurement methodology. We backdated the data to this date. There's an alert right now that's telling me something about that with ads on the screen. But unless I have a reason to think that, and I don't really have a reason to think that the search query performance data is unreliable. So I don't want to give that impression at all. But what I do really look at is how many more or fewer searches did somebody make for a keyword like camp chair this January compared to January.
Relative change.
Super useful. Or what percentage of the camp chair clicks did my brand get compared to the month before, compared to the year before? That's super actionable. And as far as I know, very reliable. I haven't seen any reason to doubt that the definitions behind those numbers are changing. And so I think those tell us a lot about what's changing about our performance and our position in a category, even if I don't know that, how many of my sales I should be attributing to search versus something else.
I mean, look, there are so many things that are very useful. For example, impression share, that's very important, very valuable. You can have add to cart rate, purchase rate. Those are all, the numbers may not be important, but especially looking at it relatively over time to see how it's something that's being consistently getting cart ads and purchases versus something that's sporadically getting. Those are all things that you can say, there's something here, so I can run more paid ads for this, or change my content, change my picture. Those keywords that are not getting click-throughs, that's also something that you can say, getting good impression share, but not click-through. I don't know if that's possible, but these are all things that are useful. Well, this
Yeah,
we kind of digress, but it's a
we
good
did. Yeah,
discussion.
yeah, very
So
good.
yeah, Nathan, tell us about yourself. I'd like to get to know my guests also, but not really interested in your resume, so to speak. So we know you've been
Mhm.
in this space long enough,
Yeah,
but you are an entrepreneur first and foremost, because you
yeah,
started your company, and that's a whole different ball game than working somewhere. So, what was it that I want to know usually from my guests? What was it in their early lives
yeah,
that gave some signs that you are going to be an entrepreneur? So, do you remember as a
yeah.
kid?
I remember I was in high school, and um, I was someone who, I still am someone who gets very enthusiastically into my hobbies, goes very deep. I love understanding how things work and why, and so I love doing that. And I was doing this when I was young as well. But what it meant was I got really good at things for a couple years, probably on average, and then I'd get really good at something else. And so when my dad was thinking about what's Nathan's career going to be, he was that aspect of my personality, I think, was probably on his mind. And so he had me take a career test, like, oh, what career might you be interested in, and might take to in the future to help guide, where do you go to college, what major do you study, things like that. And so my memory of this is that I came out of that test thinking, one, I want to be a musician. Uh, didn't happen. I am musical. I play an instrument, but far from a professional musician. And two was, I think I want to be an entrepreneur, but I don't like risk.
Entrepreneurship is all about risk.
Yeah, very surprising. I remember talking about that aspect of it with my dad at the time. So like, maybe entrepreneurship isn't for you. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. I'm not really about taking on a bunch of risk on my life. I like knowing what's going to be coming.
Why is it that you didn't like risk?
I don't know if I have a reason for that. It seems something in my personality where I like understanding something deeply. That's very gratifying to me. And if I don't understand something deeply, I tend to not speak, not put myself out there. I think I wait until I think, well, I need to spend more time and try to understand this before I take a step out. So I don't know if there's a reason for that, or if it's just something that's part of my personality and part of my nature. But I think a lot of that speaks to how I became an entrepreneur. Because as if you're thinking about the timeline, I started this business 2 years ago, and I've been working at Amazon for a dozen years. So one of the things that tells me is I eliminated a lot of the risk that I might feel by really understanding um, the value that I was able to provide to customers, developing relationships with brands and with other people, with my co-founder, and also feeling like I understood the market enough to be confident leaving a larger company and moving to a small company. I felt like I understood the market to the point where I didn't think that the big companies were just going to eat up all the small companies in the Amazon agency space, despite a lot of mergers and acquisitions over the past few years. So when I think about it, I think that career test came to mind because I did feel like, well, in terms of the amount of risk I can eliminate with becoming an entrepreneur and starting a business and not having no guarantee of what's coming next, I felt like enough of it had been eliminated that it didn't worry me. I didn't feel like it was a massive risk. I was also at the point in my career where I was going to be looking for the next thing anyway. And so when you're thinking about risk, you often think about opportunity cost. And it's not just what's the likelihood that this course of action will fail, but compared to all the other courses of action and their likelihoods of failing. I felt like, it was about as risky as starting a new job that could have not gone well, and where I also had a lot of unknowns.
What you are saying is Amazon is the only area where you could exercise this entrepreneurship. You're not someone who would see an opportunity and go after it as an entrepreneur, like most entrepreneurs would do.
No, to me, it's more the subject matter than the entrepreneurship that excites me.
I see.
Or more just, feeling confident in my understanding of the subject matter that says, okay, I can go and do this. If a great business idea came to me in a field I was unfamiliar with, there's no chance I'd step on board, even if I trusted the people involved, if I had the money, if I don't understand the space and what's going on, probably not gonna take a step out there.
Well, this is definitely not the characteristic of entrepreneurs because they are risk takers by design.
Yeah, and I think again, it comes down to how you think about risk too, where
Yeah,
I think entrepreneurs, while they take on monetary risk or other forms of risk, they may be thinking more about, well, can I be happy working for somebody else? Like, will I regret later in life not having tried this? And to them, the risk, those things might outweigh the financial risk striking out on their own. I think for me, the financial risk was the part that made me hesitant. And so when I felt like, well, that in this particular case, that's not a big deal, then that's what freed me up to take the step forward and become an entrepreneur. That's classically full of risk, where other people probably come to different conclusions at different points in the process.
Yeah. You are a very steady kind of person. So, you really ought to be regulating the stock market.
Regulating the stock market. That's probably another area where I feel like I don't have too much understanding. So all my investments are in index funds.
Well, but I mean, assuming that you acquire the knowledge, you would be the perfect fit for the SEC, like running the SEC or something like that, because you would not allow anything that is not sound and that makes sense. And as you know, from everything, I mean, I'm not a stock market guy either, but everything that we saw in the past, the financial meltdown and everything, the kind of stuff that they pull, it's unbelievable. Well, anyway, the conversation is never enough time for this conversations. We love talking about it. So, Nathan, tell us, how can people reach you? Share your contact information with us.
Sure. So the agency I run is Mercantile Commerce. Our website's mercantilecommerce.com. There's a contact form on the website. All those go to my inbox. That's probably the best way. I'm also on LinkedIn, so despite the amount of spam that comes through LinkedIn, I still read messages sooner or later and get back to people who are really reaching out to network. So yeah, like you said at the beginning, we're a boutique agency. Today we work with just a few brands, and we have deep expertise in the outdoor industry, and so that's kind of where we sit, and we're always open to the next opportunity, so long as it makes sense for everyone and we feel like we can add a lot of value. So our website, mercantilecommerce.com, or if you do find me on LinkedIn, you can reach me there as well.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure you'll hear everything you say is the kind of stuff that people can take to the bank. Otherwise, you wouldn't say it in the first place. That's the impression I'm getting.
Well, I try to do that, yes. The way I try to couch all these things, especially relating this back to forecasting, because I do not know what's going to happen next year.
Sure.
At the same time, I write down exactly how many units I think we're going to sell for every SKU in our catalog for next year. And so every time that gets sent, it comes with caveats that we don't know what's going to happen. If there's known uncertainty, then I'll list that. But really the most dangerous thing is to not plan and to not write down what you think will happen. And so at the same time, we don't know what will happen, but we have to make the best decision we can today. That's what I try to do, and that's what I do on my best days.
Yeah, well, that's the right way to. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Nick. This was really enjoyable.
Before I go, a quick reminder to say goodbye to your cash flow problems and claim your extra $1,500 when you qualify for $25,000 or more in funding. Go to www.runviably.com/legends and start your application today. Thank you. And this brings us to the end of another episode. And I'll see you in the next.
If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the episode, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too.